Firefighter cried as he told me the particulars of the incident, and yet, at every step, I knew there was faith there. I knew there was trust there. There was confidence. We're good people, courageous people. We're going to pick up the pieces and we're going to do what is right. And I don't think I have seen, and I've been in the hospitals, I've been over at Chelsea Piers, I've been at the new school where people were finding out that their relatives were dead. I spent all day yesterday, yesterday morning rather, walking through the dust. I assure you, Mr. Blitzer, the people are figuring it out. They have confidence in their God, and they are showing heroism and love. I'm not worried at all about New York or the nation.
Cardinal McCarrick, we only have a little time left, but I think it's your impression, I know it's mine, that even though you couldn't blame anyone for losing their faith at a time when these kinds of horrible tragedies unfold, my sense is people get a stronger bit of faith during these terrible, terrible moments. Is that your impression as well?
I think it's true. I think what His Eminence Cardinal Egan said is so very true, and I commend him for the extraordinary goodness that he's shown the last few days in being with the people. But I think one of the things that appeared to me as something very, very strong was when we were watching these terrible things happening last Tuesday, constantly people who saw what was going on would say, "Oh my God, oh my God." I'm sure in a certain sense that's a cultural response, but it's also more than that. It's also the cry of people who know that they need the Lord and who reach out to Him. Because as the Cardinal said so well, they really trust Him. We trust the Lord. We Americans have always trusted the Lord. And I think at a moment like this, that happens more clearly, more profoundly, more perfectly. And I see it happening down here in Washington. I'm a New Yorker, so I know that it happens up in New York too. And I think what the Cardinal is saying is absolutely true. The people come at these moments to recognize that even though they are unhappy about what is happening in their lives, yet they know that there is a providence that looks over them and watches them and takes care of them.
I want to thank both of you very much, Cardinal Egan, Cardinal McCarrick. Thank you so much for your words on this evening. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Will. Thank you.
We appreciate it very much. And let's go down to my colleague, Greta Van Susteren, for more. Greta?
Wolf, it has been a day of prayer, as your guests have noticed, and it's been a day of painstaking work. And a couple of hours ago, there was an absolutely incredible show of emotion. As President Bush toured the disaster scene at the World Trade Center, all of the rescue workers began chanting, "USA, USA." Watch and listen.
I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
We'll have more from New York in just a minute, but first let's recap the day's most important developments. Justice Department sources tell CNN an individual has been arrested as a material witness in the terrorist hijacking investigation. U.S. officials tell CNN there are still would-be terrorists inside the United States who may try to attack targets in the country. Some may be trained as pilots. And if that isn't scary enough, officials say there may be other types of threats as well. A well-placed security source tells CNN that Atlanta, Boston, and Richmond, Virginia also were terrorist targets. The only specifics given were tall buildings and sports facilities. While the investigation continues, the nation mourned its dead today. You're looking now at live pictures of a candlelight vigil in Providence, Rhode Island. Similar services are being held around the country. This is a national day of remembrance in honor of the thousands of victims of Tuesday's terror attacks. Former Presidents Ford, Carter, Bush, and Clinton joined President George W. Bush and the Reverend Billy Graham at this noontime memorial service in Washington. The president then went to New York. CNN national correspondent Gary Tuchman joins me from Ground Zero near the World Trade Center with more on the president's visit and the continuing around-the-clock search for victims. Gary, what's going on in New York now?
Greta, it's a fact that's very difficult to comprehend. More than 4,700 people are still missing, and the search continues for each and every one of them right behind me. This is where the World Trade Center used to stand, 4 blocks back there. Now it's a cauldron. Fires continue to burn. The steam continues to billow. Rescue and recovery workers are still on the scene as they've been since Tuesday, 1,000 to 2,000 of them working right now. But the search has been very disappointing. No survivors have been found over the last 2 days. They do continue to find people who perished when the planes crashed through the World Trade Center, but even that has gone very slowly. More than 10,000 tons of rubble have been recovered. That's 20 million pounds. But it hasn't made much of a dent. We look at it, and it still looks much the same. That gives you an idea of how much rubble is there. There was a very special visitor, as you said before, Greta, today. The President of the United States, George W. Bush, came to New York City, and that did raise the morale of the rescue workers, according to the workers we've talked to today. The President of the United States toured the area, got cheers from the rescue workers. They did shout, USA, USA. He was with the mayor of New York City, the governor of New York State, and also New York's 2 Democratic senators, Charles Schumer, and somebody he knows very well, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And then we saw a very unusual sight. The President of the United States mounting the top of the rubble and talking to all the workers with a megaphone.
America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you.
President Bush arrived at the site shortly after the sun came out after 12 hours of heavy rain. The search is excruciatingly difficult, but it was very, very difficult from 2 a.m. this morning Eastern Time till about 2 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Time. Monsoon-type rain and lots of thunder and lightning. And I have to tell you that thunder was psychologically difficult for many people in this area. It sounded like when the plane slammed into the buildings. The same thing happened in Oklahoma City 6 years ago when they had the implosion of the building. That explosion psychologically scarred many people, and that was the scene. It also slowed down the search dramatically. It was very hard with all the rain, but now they are back to full speed at the site, 5 blocks behind me. Greta, back to you.
Gary Tuchman, thank you very much for joining me from Ground Zero in New York. Now for the question everybody wants answered. What's being done to track down the would-be terrorist thugs who may be prowling around this country? That is CNN national security correspondent David Enser's department, and he joins me here in Washington. David, we're hearing reports that there are other would-be targets or would-be terrorists in this country. What can you tell us?
Well, that's right, Greta. U.S. officials are telling me that they have evidence that there may still be some individuals in this country who would like to commit terrorist acts, who are looking for targets. They don't rule out that there may be pilots still in this country, and there are other threats they're also concerned about. They won't go into any more detail than that, but they're forthright about saying that they are very concerned that there still could be terrorists waiting to try and commit terrorism inside this country. And as all this is going on, of course, the president and his aides are trying to figure out how to build a coalition for what they are calling a war. Down the line, the president has acknowledged indirectly in some of what he said today, there is going to have to be military action.
The nation is angry about thousands of innocent deaths. U.S. officials say the evidence so far points to Osama bin Laden's group, and the Bush administration is talking tough.
We will go after that group, that network, and those who have harbored, supported, and aided that network to rip the network up. And when we're through with that network, we will continue with a global assault against terrorism in general.
But if it is bin Laden, how to get at him and his top lieutenants. Some argue for giving Afghanistan's Taliban government an ultimatum: turn him over or else.
We know where your ministries are, we know where your houses are. We're simply going to obliterate them from the face of the planet.
Bouncing that rubble with a lot of B-52 loads of bombs, I don't think is going to change Afghanistan all that much.
No, say most analysts in and out of government. If you want to roll up bin Laden and al-Qaeda, it is going to take more than bombs. It will take ground troops.
In order for us to preserve America and our way of life, we're going to have to sacrifice American treasure and, unfortunately, in some cases, perhaps some American blood.
It is not just a question of grabbing or killing one man or even 20. There are a dozen or more training camps, U.S. intelligence says, producing more terrorists dedicated to killing Americans.
Revenge alone is not an answer. There has to be a complete eradication and elimination of all the training camps.
And much of bin Laden's base of support is in neighboring Pakistan, through which money from around the Arab world is funneled to the al-Qaeda coffers. It is a treacherous and dangerous area indeed.
If you start moving in ground troops and you're willing to occupy countries for long periods of time, you do change things rather significantly for terrorists. I'm not sure this country is ready to do that, even if it does have a fit of passion right now, and it may or may not make sense for the U.S. to do that in its larger interests.
Bottom line, Greta, U.S. forces possibly could go into Afghanistan and get bin Laden, but that might not end the terrorism.
David, the big issue, of course, in terms of the terrorism is who's paying for it. Bin Laden has an awful lot of money. Is there been an effort to sort of freeze and track his money to sort of at least cut his throat at that point?
Yes, there is indeed. In fact, a number of calls were made today and yesterday by senior officials in the administration, particularly at the State Department, to other leaders around the region, moderate Arab leaders, Pakistani leader and others, saying, look, we know that you've been turning a blind eye up till now to certain payments by wealthy Muslims going to charities and other fronts for the bin Laden organization. That must now stop. You have to decide which side you are on. And U.S. officials are saying, we have ways and means of tracking this, and we will be doing it from now on. We want to see who's on our side. You must pick sides at this point on this matter of money. Greta?
David Enzer, thank you, from Washington. Around the United States, patriotism is the order of the day. Flag sales are way up. Kmart and Walmart together have sold more than 500,000 flags since Tuesday, and the U.S. military is gearing up for whatever orders are coming.
Tuesday, September the 11th, has already been described in various newspapers and publications as the darkest day in American history. I would only say to our adversaries that I would warn to watch carefully, for you are about to see our finest hour in the future.
President Bush also is calling in the reserves. After declaring a state of national emergency, the president authorized the Defense Department to call up as many as 50,000 military reservists for Homeland Defense. Among the people suddenly making new plans are University professor Ann Knabe, who is a reservist in public affairs. She joins me from Milwaukee. In San Antonio, Texas, is Dr. Jerry Greenfield, a reservist and orthopedic surgeon. And here in Washington is Susan Borschel. She's a real estate attorney who would be called up as an intelligence officer. And first to you, do you expect to be called up, and are you ready?
Yes, we're ready to go if indeed we would get the call. At this time, I don't know, but we're set.
Dr. Greenfield, do you expect to be called, and are you ready?
I right now don't know if we'll be called, but I am ready and just await that call.
Susan Borschel, do you expect to be called, and are you ready?
I expect that at some point I would be called, and my family and I are ready for this.
Susan, what have you done to get ready?
I first of all made sure that my children and my husband, who is prior military, have an understanding of the kind of effect that this would have on the family, and I've tried to make sure that all arrangements have been made both at home and at office so that people could step in and it won't cause any or it will minimize the amount of hardship on my family and the folks at the office that will need to cover for me.
Susan, how old are your children?
I have a 9-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son.
And do they understand that you're in the reservists and you may be called up?
Yes, my daughter obviously less so. My son who has shown a fervent sense of patriotism the last couple days, has a very clear understanding.
And do you want to be called up?